Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the story of a plant that is probably sitting on a bookshelf or trailing down a cabinet in your home right this very second. We're going to start by looking at its glowing reputation as an absolute indoor marvel. But then, well, we're going to uncover its incredibly dark, destructive alter ego outside. Get ready because we are about to meet the true Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of the botanical world. Let's talk about English ivy. Now, if you spend literally any time in online plant communities, you've definitely seen posts praising this stuff. Plant lovers and lifestyle influencers alike just rave about English ivy. Honestly, it's often hailed as this absolute powerhouse for your home environment. Fans are obsessed with its incredible ability to quickly clean indoor air, with some people even reporting huge improvements in air quality in just 12 hours. It gets pitched as, the ultimate green companion for a healthy home. And to be fair, that praise isn't just internet hype. Inside, English ivy really does boast some serious superhero traits. Believe it or not, it's actually a NASA-certified absorber of harmful indoor gases, stuff like formaldehyde and benzene, which are toxins you commonly find in everyday furniture and paint. Plus, its vining leaves act like a natural humidifier to combat dry winter air. Studies have even shown it can reduce airborne molds by up to 94% in just half a day. Add in the fact that it's practically unkillable. It survives freezing temperatures down to -5 degrees Celsius, and it's super easy to see why it's a household favorite. But here is the million-dollar question. What happens when this tough, low-maintenance superhero escapes your living room and gets out into the wild? Well, the narrative completely flips, because it turns out the exact same traits that make it a resilient, fast-growing houseplant turn it into an absolute nightmare outdoors. We're talking about an invader capable of collapsing local biodiversity and utterly destroying entire forest ecosystems. To really grasp how bad this gets, we need to trace its fall from grace. Originally, English ivy was brought over to North America from Europe during early colonial times. Back then, it was highly prized for landscaping. But fast forward a few centuries, and its totally unchecked spread forced a major legal reckoning. Just think about how massive a threat a plant has to be to go from a cherished garden staple to a legally quarantined species. By 2002, Washington state slapped it with a Class C noxious weed classification. And today, the situation is so dire that Oregon put it under strict quarantine. It is literally illegal to buy, sell, propagate, or even transport it there. So, what makes this plant such an unstoppable force? It all comes down to its totally wild biology. English ivy actually has two distinct life stages. First, in its juvenile stage, it forms these creeping vines with roots that can easily clone themselves from just tiny broken fragments. This lets it aggressively conquer the ground. But when it eventually finds a way to climb, it transforms into its adult stage. It develops stiff, woody stems, the actual shape of its leaves completely changes, and most dangerously, it starts producing berries. Birds eat those berries, fly off, and boom, they launch ivy seeds far and wide into healthy, uninfected forests. And when those dispersed seeds land and take root in a natural forest, they eventually create a scenario that ecologists dreadfully call an ivy desert. Now, an ivy desert is basically an ecological dead zone. It happens when this incredibly thick, smothering mat of ivy completely dominates the forest floor. The result is just devastating. A total, complete eradication of native understory plants, wildflowers, and shrubs. It strips the ecosystem of the foundational biodiversity it absolutely needs to survive. This mat it forms is basically a masterclass in aggressive competition. These vines can grow up to a staggering 10 meters a year. They just vigorously steal all the soil moisture and nutrients, but worse than that, they weave this dense, overlapping layer of shade that completely blocks sunlight from ever reaching the soil. Because of that, native tree and shrub seedlings never even get the chance to sprout. It abruptly halts the natural regeneration process that a healthy, biodiverse forest relies on to keep going. And there's a really bitter irony to its reputation here. Remember how we said it's celebrated as a natural air purifier indoors? Well, outside, it's shockingly toxic. The sap actually contains allergens that can cause contact dermatitis, like a terrible rash in sensitive folks. Its leaves and dark purple berries are mildly poisonous, and they can easily sicken cattle, native wildlife, and even your domestic pets if they eat it. Oh, and instead of supporting native biodiversity, these expansive, tangled mats end up acting like a 5-star, highly protected hotel for urban rats. It's almost hard to believe we're talking about the same plant, right? Unfortunately, the devastation absolutely does not stop at the forest floor. Once English ivy runs out of ground to cover, it looks up. It heads straight up the trunks of our mature, ancient forest trees. As it climbs, it unleashes this compounding series of lethal threats against the forest giants. First, the vines form new layers high in the canopy that outshade the host tree's own leaves, literally starving the tree of sunlight. Second, as the vines creep up, they pry loose the tree's bark, trapping moisture against the trunk and rapidly accelerating deadly rot. And if that wasn't enough, it acts as a reservoir for a nasty plant pathogen called bacterial leaf scorch, which severely harms native elms, oaks, and maples. We are talking about the tragic, systematic loss of the anchor trees that hold the whole forest together. Plus, because English ivy is an evergreen, it keeps its heavy, thick leaves all winter long. Imagine adding a heavy winter rain, or ice, or snow to a tree that is completely engulfed in a massive wall of ivy foliage. The weight becomes catastrophic. It makes these newly top-heavy, weakened trees incredibly susceptible to tipping right over or just snapping in half during winter windstorms. It literally pulls the forest canopy straight down to the ground. Now, as a quick aside, it is worth noting that while we colloquially call all of this stuff English ivy, there are actually two dominant genetic variations currently destroying North American forests. Over on the East Coast, the primary invader is true Hedera helix, which is suited for continental climates. But on the West Coast, especially up in the Pacific Northwest, the culprit is often Hedera hibernatica, or Irish ivy, which thrives in maritime climates. But honestly, both of them are equally destructive to native biodiversity. What complicates all of this even further is our own modern land management. Oddly enough, human fire suppression actually helps this plant spread. Research over in Europe showed that ivy frequency is highest in forests that haven't seen a fire in over 100 years. On the flip side, it's almost completely absent in areas that naturally burn every 25 years or less. So by jumping in and preventing natural, low-intensity forest fires, we're inadvertently creating the absolutely perfect, undisturbed conditions for this weed to thrive and take over. Okay, so how do we actually stop this aggressive invader, especially when the horticultural industry and regular homeowners still love buying it for their living rooms? Well, solutions require both personal choices and strong government action. For starters, we absolutely have to avoid planting it anywhere near natural forests to stop birds from spreading the seeds. We also need more states to step up and follow Oregon's lead with strict quarantines. And for forests where it's already creeping in, early manual thinning is totally critical to prevent those massive, suffocating mats from forming. Now, what if an ivy desert is already fully established? Land managers generally face a tough choice between two common removal methods. They can either spray chemical herbicides, like glyphosate, or they can commit to the backbreaking, exhausting labor of manual hand-pulling. For a long time, the ecological consequences of literally ripping vines out of the soil by hand weren't entirely clear. But recent studies have actually given us a really fascinating insight into this. So here is the crucial takeaway. While rolling up your sleeves and ripping ivy out by the roots definitely causes a temporary disruption to the soil, that disruption is actually incredibly beneficial. Studies show that just 10 weeks after manual removal, native plant regeneration, species richness, and overall biodiversity drastically increase compared to the areas treated with chemicals. It turns out that aggressively churning up the soil is exactly the jumpstart that dormant native seeds need to wake up, reclaim their habitat, and restore the forest. But hey, if the idea of manually hand-pulling acres of stubborn vines sounds way too exhausting, I'll leave you with a surprisingly fun fact. Research out in Oregon found that you can actually outsource all that labor to a herd of hungry domestic goats. Grazing goats proved to be highly effective, chewing a near monoculture of English ivy down to just 4% cover over a 2-year period. Honestly, talk about an eco-friendly workforce, right? So we've seen how a plant that is celebrated for effortlessly cleaning our living rooms can systematically dismantle the biodiversity of our wild forests. It suffocates the understory, sickens local wildlife, and literally pulls down centuries-old trees. It's a pretty stark reminder that what thrives in a little pot on your shelf absolutely doesn't always belong out in the wild. So the next time you're at the nursery looking for a charming new vine or a quick ground cover, ask yourself, will you reconsider what you might be unleashing into your own backyard? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the world around you.